We're here to explore the imposter syndrome that haunts creatives, delving into how it affects their lives and work. Join us as we chat with authors and artists about creativity, self-doubt, featuring imposter characters in their stories, and the occasional imposter who pops up in their day-to-day lives.
Today, we are beyond excited to have the amazing May Cobb on the show. May is an award-winning author of The Hunting Wives, My Summer Darlings, A Likeable Woman, and Big Woods. Her books have received attention from the Book of the Month Club, The Today Show, and Oprah Daily, and have been optioned for film and TV. She is an MA from San Francisco State University, and her essays and interviews have appeared in the Washington Post and Good Housekeeping. She currently lives in Austin with her family, and her novel, The Hunting Wives, is soon to be a series on STARZ. And do we have the Hollywood assistant in there? That too. Welcome, May.
Thank you both for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh my God.
Thrilled to have you. I'm going to jump in with a thing that we've been finding with guests more often than not on this show. As Liz just read through your incredible resume, you read that, and then I have to wonder, where does your imposter syndrome come from? I mean, that is that's like a well,
yeah,
you know, that's a good looking resume. So well, I know you experience it, but we'd love to hear kind of if you could share a bit about what that looks like for you.
That's very kind of you to say so. Thank you. Honestly, and I didn't mention this in our emails that we were doing before the show, but it just occurred to me that starting out, I was working on a nonfiction book, and I still am, and I hope to finish it, about the jazz musician Rahsaan Roland Kirk. And wow, talk about feeling like an imposter. Being 25 years old and thinking, who am I to write a book about someone of his stature? And I still feel that way. And that's why it's such a hard book to finish, because the thought of, can I ever do this person justice? And I think until I got my debut published in 2018, when someone would ask what I did, I really would never say writer, which sometimes I would say it, then I would just bumble around and add all these, disclaimers. And yeah, it should, if you get up and write, you just need to call yourself a writer. It doesn't matter if there's a publishing contract or a paycheck attached to it yet. That's what you're doing. Especially if you didn't have another career, which I didn't. It's always been odd jobs and stuff. So I still feel like an imposter. Even y'all reading my bio, I'm like, haha, yeah, those were all little lucky breaks or whatever,
Yeah, I mean, I really, obviously we relate to this concept, or we wouldn't have centered a whole show around it. But as you were just answering the part about when people asked you what you do and you were reluctant or hesitant to say that you were a writer, I definitely have had that experience my whole life, even though I've been writing in some shape or form since I was a kid. And even now, I still kind of hesitate. And I'm wondering, what do you think it is? Is it more about how you feel about yourself as a writer, how you think the world perceives writers, a little bit of both?
Gosh, it probably is a little bit of both. For me, it could be being female probably has something to do with it. Being Southern definitely has something to do with it. That sort of impulse to deflect. Or to, I don't know. And then, because you also know, you can kind of guess the stranger's next question, have you written anything I've read of? Well, the answer is definitely still no. So sometimes you don't want to even bring it up. It's well, if you look hard enough in the Barnes and Noble, and then you might find it in the back. I don't know. So maybe you've read it, but you probably haven't read it. And, it's just such an awkward, because it's sort of like actors, there's those top celebrities, and then there's this massive class of, mid-level actors who that's their career. They're making a living at it, but maybe people who who aren't big TV buffs or film buffs, they don't know their names. So I'm sure it's kind of that same feeling, I think, who was it? I think someone said the only author that gets recognized is it's either Stephen King or John Grisham, or maybe both. Like, so yeah. Anyway, I'm sure all that contributes, you know.
Yeah. Well, and to build on that, I'm thinking about when people ask that question and then, you know, oh, have you written anything I've read? And probably they haven't. Or like, what genre do you write in? There's an interesting array of responses. But then now you have that, oh, has your book been made into something I would have seen on TV? So with The Hunting Wives, you have an imminent STARZ adaptation coming out. Has that kind of changed how either you feel about yourself or how people respond to you when you say what you do?
Yeah, I mean, it has. I'm not going to pretend it hasn't. Like, I will low key squeeze that into the conversation sometimes if I'm feeling in the mood to continue the conversation. And yes, it definitely elicits a different response. And then, so that's exciting. But you know, it's just such a weird thing. Writing is such a, like a private thing. And it is weird to, I don't know. And I still don't think of myself as a really like great writer or anything, or even a good writer most of the time. And so that's also another thing. It's like every book I read, I'm like, oh my God, that's so astonishing. I wish I could write a book like that. So that also keeps the humility at an all-time high.
Right.
And the imposter syndrome. I love y'all's show. What a great show.
Oh.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we realized the more we talk to authors, the more everyone has some version of it. So we just figured, like, let's have a forum so that everyone feels like, you know, like everyone is disabused of this notion that they're the only one sitting there feeling these feelings at their desk, you know?
Yeah. I love it. It's great.
We talked a bit about Hunting Wives, and I wanted to ask, I know that the first season was in production and you actually were able to spend some time on set. What was that experience like?
Yes, it was amazing. I got to go out there for pilot week, so that was so much fun. And they gave me a cameo, non-speaking, thank God, because like my accent. But it was, and I'm not an in front of the camera type person, so that was so much fun. And then I went back out there a handful of times too, just because I knew it would be over with before I knew it, and it was. It was like 8-week shoot, and I think I visited 4 times, but really sometimes it was just for a day or two. It was really that first week they felt like it would be special for me, and hopefully for them to have me out there for pilot week. And it was, because that's most of the cast were there during that week. And so I got to meet kind of everybody, and it was just so cool because I don't take credit for the show. I know I'm the creator of the source material, and what they've done is so bonkers great that I'm so excited about it. And everyone was so warm and welcoming, and I want to say like grateful to be back to work after the strike. So it was just really a really awesome feeling. And to get to see them bring the characters to life, like that was it's still surreal to me.
Yeah. Did they stay pretty true, relatively true, or kind of dead letter perfect to your version? And how was that process? Like, was there a lot of letting go of the work you had put down and then what they made into it? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I don't know how much I can talk about that, but what I will say is that whatever they did, all of it really did stay true to the spirit of it. It never felt like, oh, this is outside of the universe, this very twisted, raunchy universe. It all fit very neatly in there. So I'm thrilled with what I've been able to see. I'm just ready for it to come out because I want to see the rest of it. And of course I want to see, what everyone else thinks and everything.
Do you have an air date at this time, or is it still?
Yeah, not yet. So hopefully soon we'll have that.
Okay.
Well, and then you can stop hearing that question.
Exactly.
No, I don't mind it. I probably ask it a lot, a lot more than they want me to. They'll get to stop hearing that question from me. No, they're very sweet, but I'll check in because I'm so excited, obviously, and I would like to know. So hopefully soon.
Good. I'd love to go back to something you said a few minutes ago about sort of feeling like maybe part of your imposter syndrome has something to do with being a female. There's as our thriller listeners will be familiar with, there's this very kind of common trope in thrillers of the unlikable character, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think particularly that applies to female characters because of a lot of societal double standards and things like that. Yeah. You actually titled one of your novels "A Likeable Woman," and you dedicated it to your mom, who, and I quote, taught you from a very young age that it's best to aspire to be an unlikable woman. And I love that so much. I have to imagine that must have been an incredible gift for you to receive at that point in your life, to hear that.
I love that you quoted that. Yes, no, absolutely. My mom is very much the opposite of me. She doesn't give a you know what, and I am more of a people-pleasing middle child. Like, I don't want anyone mad at me ever. And that's just not her way. And so she's always been kind of my hero. And yeah, it's, so basically, like, we grew up in a small town, and then my parents were a little bit in, like, sort of more the high society for a second, and then they got divorced and the recession hit. And so I don't want to say my mom was cast out of that group, but she kind of was, like, no longer in the junior league and stuff like that. So she definitely took this turn where she was just like, yeah, I really don't care what anyone thinks. And, not in a negative way, in a very positive, empowering way. I still wish I could be like, I'm still, will fall over myself to make others happy.
Yeah, I wonder about that kind of common denominator, because Greg, I feel like this has come up in a lot of these interviews too with author friends, this kind of like more leaning towards people pleasing, non-confrontational, but then we write these characters that are very personality forward, confrontational, homicidal, fill in the blank. And maybe just speaking for myself, but I'm curious, May, what you think, and Greg, what you think. Like, is there almost like a bridge that we gap in our maybe limitations in the real world we can do with our characters? I mean, I think I do for sure.
I love that. I've never thought about that before, but Liz, I bet you're right. Greg, you want to answer first?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely, and I think of this often with writing and with reading too. It's, and art in general. I'll say it. I think part of one of the things that is really beautiful about art is that there's a catharsis built into that, right? I mean, you can get out all of that stuff, anything that is irking you, any frustrations that you have, whether it be personal, family, societal, any of that stuff. It gives you a format to, whether you're railing against it, trying to process it, or what have you. I mean, it's like it's a really healthy outlet for all of that stuff that I think probably the average person is walking around with a head full of at all times. And I think that having an actual healthy avenue to process it is wonderful, and we've somehow figured out how to make it a career, which is kind of a magic trick.
It is a magic trick, and we're in the most fun genre for it, right?
I know. Yeah. Well, we always say, it's funny, like, I feel like we have these conversations, both Liz and I, with one another, but also with, this wonderful thriller community that we're part of. It's like thriller people, thriller writers are the nicest people that you meet. And I can't, and I have to believe that for, at least a big part of it is that we are writing about mayhem and, all kinds of things that we can then kind of get out of our psyche, or at least process in a healthy way. And it makes for a pretty well-adjusted person,
Yeah, I think so. I heard Julia Bart's, it was Thriller Fest year before last, and she was doing like the debut lunch breakfast thing. And she was saying that, because she's a therapist as well as a thriller author, but she had noted that she felt like we were all so nice because we could work out like our shadow selves, you know.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so smart. Well, I mean, kind of along these lines, one of the things I love about your books is the kind of exploration of like female friendship dynamics and mean girls and, you know, the kind of whole personality dynamic. Can you talk about that? Is that intentional? Is that just kind of your experiential, observational side? Where does that come from for you?
I really think it comes from watching that movie Heathers like way too many times growing up.
Yes.
and then just, you know, navigating middle school and carrying those scars around. And I've always had a great group of friends, but it's always been, and particularly in the South, it's like, it's a very like treacherous, weird, there's passive aggressiveness where bless your heart can really mean I've already figured out where I'm going to bury your body. Like, it's just like, it can be very wicked down here as it can everywhere. And so I feel like women are just so complicated, and not that men aren't, but something about like when my husband hangs out with his friends, I mean, they talk about football. Yeah, they might talk about politics and other stuff too, but like, wow, women can go to some crazy places psychologically. And the games they can play, the female power dynamics are insane to me.
Yeah. Well, one of your books, My Summer Darlings, features such a trio of women, of female friend characters. And going along a little bit with the theme of our show here, there is an imposter character. Here we are. For our YouTube viewers, there's the cover. But there's an imposter character element to that story as well, which kind of fits in. I wonder if you could talk about kind of the process of writing that sort of character into your storyline.
Yeah, for that book, I really was trying to do like a kind of like a little tribute to the Witches of Eastwick, where that film where you have, you know, like Jack Nicholson being the handsome, mysterious, wealthy stranger that moves into town. So I wanted like updated version of that, but without the paranormal stuff. And so the man that moves to town is sort of pretending to be each woman's dreams. And he's really good at manipulation and all those things. And as you know, and it's not really too much of a spoiler because the book's been out, 3 years maybe. So, but you know, he is not who he turns out to be. He is, he's not the devil, because I didn't want to do the paranormal stuff, but he is a devil in his own way. So he is this imposter that's moved to town. And I was thinking also on that note, I didn't realize this, but I do think in The Hunting Wives, the character of Sophie, the main character who moves back to the small Texas town, I do think she feels like an imposter because she's such an outsider. And I think that's why she falls prey to so many things. So I think I played with that in different ways in both those books.
Well, it's interesting because you have, because of the way you write those dynamics with those Texas kind of social circles, it creates this very insular community and dynamic that then people can kind of come in and either, disrupt, disturb, or kind of be pushed out of. I mean, it's like a really compelling social dynamic, I think, especially for kind of thriller mystery stuff.
Well, thank you. It's just my childhood.
I have to point this out because there was a moment of kismet that I can't let go by. So you just mentioned Witches of Eastwick. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to show you here. You'll see this. This is actually a book that Liz got me for my birthday many years ago, and it happens to be and it happens to be on the bookshelf in the office that I'm in right now.
That's crazy.
For our listeners who aren't seeing this, I'm holding up the book that May just mentioned that Liz got me
crazy
a decade ago or something. Here it is. So
yeah, and your next birthday is imminent. It's like in a couple of days. So all the circles.
Oh my God. I love that. I love that kismet so much. And happy early birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. That was not a fish for a birthday wish, but thank you.
Well, you got it.
I got it.
Well, also, I was thinking with the kind of like the interloper imposter character also works for Cassidy, right? In The Hollywood Assistant. I mean, this is one of the things I love in, all of your books is that this kind of plot driven by a character going into a dynamic or a population or a setting that like they really have to fake it, sometimes for their survival, their literal survival. And I would love if you could talk a little bit about The Hollywood Assistant. I mean, I have many, many questions, but that comes from personal experience, right? You were a Hollywood assistant at some point in your life. Is that right?
Yeah. About 20 years ago, I moved to LA because much like in the book, my best friend was like, move out here, I'll get you a job. And she was working for the writer-director Ron Shelton of, Bull Durham fame and Tin Cup fame and all the brilliant sports movies, White Men Can't Jump. And they were actually getting ready to go to Jamaica to shoot a film about Bob Marley that Ron had written. It was just this terrific script. And me being such a music fan, I was like, all right, I'll move to LA. Because it just wasn't like, I've never been like, ooh, celebrities, whatever. And then that project kind of fell apart as things do out there. But I moved out there, and within a week, she got me a job because another film got the green light. It's a boxing film called Play It to the Bone with Woody Harrelson, Antonio Banderas, and Lolita Davidovich. And Lolita and Ron are married, and Lolita needed an assistant at the time. And it was just one of those, like, talk about kismet things where I started working for her as her personal assistant. And within about, 3 weeks of moving out there, we all headed out to Vegas for a couple of months to film. And so that was like, are you kidding? That's so much fun. And then I really hit it off with she and Ron, and she started to give me like scripts to read that she was considering. And then Ron started to give me scripts to read, to write coverage for him, to just sort of build my chops, but make a little more money on the side too. And I loved it. And it was so surreal. It was like, wait a minute, I get to be in Vegas with my best friend on a film set, sitting in Lolita's trailer, and then at the craps table at night. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what? I had just been like this very impoverished grad student up in the Bay Area right before then, eating like frozen chicken pot pies. And so I just, it was so, oh my God. Well, but also feel like talk about feeling like an imposter. I mean, it took me forever to even like come out of the trailer and socialize for a while because and so my best friend is very different from me. She's very extroverted, outgoing. She just doesn't really care about stuff in the way that I do. And anyway, so that was very much, Cassidy was very much based on me at that time of going to LA and getting kind of swept up into this world. And then of course that's where all the similarities end, because Ron and Lolita are like family to me still. And the Nate and Marisol were not, they turn out to be nightmarish for her. So.
And did I see that Lolita was at a book event recently, right? For
Yes, it was so special to have her there because I did some tour stops in LA, and so I actually got to stay with them. And she came to Barnes and Noble with me, and then Ron and their daughter came to Zibby's with me. So it was so incredible to get to celebrate. Yeah. It was just so full circle. I was like, this is surreal.
Another full circle moment.
Yeah.
And I thought with Cassie, I think you do such a great job in that. I think for, reading it as a writer as well, you do such a great job of capturing that kind of imposter thing of, your character she's an aspiring creative herself, but then when she kind of gets the opportunity, like when she gets her shot, she still can't quite believe that it's happening, right? There's like still kind of belief of like, the thing that you've been working towards, like, what do you mean I get the chance now? And that, like, so I have to imagine there was a lot of, you were able to kind of like, work a lot of your own imposter syndrome kind of through the character in that sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've never sort of like with characters really gone that into their heads, I don't think, but I had just read Jesse Sutanto's Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers.
Yeah.
And I found the POVs to have so many like really interiority and almost like intrusive thoughts. And I thought, oh my God, that's so cool that the character can really speak aloud these things to the reader in this very intimate way. So I wanted to show all of Cassidy's vulnerabilities and awkwardness and, how it is to be a writer. And it's funny, a lot of, there are some reviewers and readers who think she's like a train wreck and who find her very weak and flawed. And I mean, I still don't really think so. I mean, I'm very much like her. Like, she's not me, but those, all that awkward stuff. Yeah, that's me. I mean, I don't know if it makes me weak or just weird.
Relatable.
I was trying to go for relatable. I really wanted to try to bring the reader along because she is, like y'all said, an outsider coming into this world. And there is a little bit of a voyeuristic aspect to it, but there is also this sort of Cinderella aspect to it too, where, she can't even believe she's going to the ball or whatever. I don't even remember how that Cinderella ends, but something about a slipper and...
Well, the voyeuristic aspect is kind of interesting too, because one of the things that I really that it put me in mind of the Hollywood Assistant were those kind of 90s very steamy neo-noir films, right?
I was just going to say that.
Right? You know what I mean? And like that's, so that was an intentional kind of influence or homage or what have you.
It definitely was. I was definitely, when I started out, I was like, I had like a little, I don't know how to make a mood board because again, I'm so low tech, but I had like screenshots from like the poster of Body Double, Basic Instinct, Fatal Attraction. I rewatched some of those films. And so I definitely wanted to do an erotic thriller in that vein. So I wanted to have that voyeuristic aspect because there was so much of the plot I didn't really know, and I was figuring it out as I was going along. But I wanted it to be the outsider looking in, and what's really happening, that type of feeling.
Yeah. Oh, you succeeded. I mean, after I finished it, I was like, I need to rewatch everything Adrian Lyne has ever directed. And in fact, when Greg and I were writing The Woman Inside, that book was so influenced by like 80s and 90s, like erotic thrillers that we had like a shared Google Drive with all of the movies we needed to rewatch.
Oh my God, I love it.
It was so many good ones, and they just don't make them like that anymore, in my opinion.
They really don't. Oh my God, I love that. Now you're making me, I want to like leave and go read that book again. Cause yes. Reread y'all's book and then rewatch all of Adrian's films. We'll
share it. We'll get you into that Google Doc and we can like group watch.
I love it.
Oh my God. Well, right now you're just back from this kind of whirlwind book tour and, doing some events with other authors, which is amazing. And obviously being on set, are you taking a beat? Are you working on something? Like what happens when you've kind of been through the hurricane of promotion?
I mean, usually I do, usually right now I would be in edits because I've been doing a book a year. And but I'm having a little bit of a different year because I am moving to a different publisher. So we did sell. I wrote another novel, and so that's placed with a new place. And so we're waiting for all that to get finalized and stuff. And so I do. It's kind of nice because I have a little bit of breathing room at the moment. I'm enjoying it. but pretty soon, I predict in the next few weeks I'll be into edits and then needing to start on the next one. So I'm also anxious to get back to work. Like, there's a point where all that extroverted stuff is really, it's too much. And I do like to be in my little corner of the room at the keyboard, channeling all the wicked thoughts that keep us nice on the outside.
There it is. Nice. Well, speaking of place, one of the things I was curious about with this is you write Texas so indelibly that it almost is a character. I mean, the setting and everything is it's so much a part of your stories. With your first few books, The Hollywood Assistant is the first one that you've written sort of outside of your native Texas. I know obviously you have the personal experience of working there, but
yeah,
did the location shift within your work kind of inform or influence how you approach the project at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you for the compliments about my Texas setting. It did make me feel a bit like an imposter, because it had been so long since I lived out there. I had visited, my best friend stayed out there until like the pandemic, and now she's back here in Austin with me. But I visited her a few times, but it had been a really long time. And so I did have to get on Google Maps and, try to find out updated restaurants and things like that. And at first I was like, why am I doing this? I need to just like stick with what I really know. But then I was like, okay, I lived there for 2 years, even though it was a long time ago. Like, it's still the same town. And so then it was fun, because it does get like exhausting to try to describe a pine tree in East Texas in a different way. It's like, I can describe some new stuff. And so that was great fun. And there's such a tradition of incredible crime fiction set in LA that also made me feel like an imposter. I was like, well, who am I to like sashay into this space? So I tried to keep it with the areas that I knew super well, or that the areas that felt noir to me, like the Hollywood Hills feel very noir to me, with their twisting streets and the switchbacks, and and as does like Near the Ocean. That feels, especially now, it's really weird. I was there this summer and there was so much fog, and they said it's like climate change, because normally you see that more in San Francisco. And yeah, after my event at Zibby's, I was walking back to my hotel and I was like, I couldn't see the tops of the tall buildings because they were in fog. And I was like, this is so cool. I didn't remember that when I lived out there.
Wow. It's like evokes Hitchcock. I'm thinking, foggy California, foggy LA.
Yeah.
Well, do you, now having kind of gone outside of the familiar Texas territory, do you think, I know you have just mentioned you are completed another novel, but have you felt empowered to kind of move out of that one kind of setting? And have you stayed within that, or are you trying other characters as place?
Well, actually, so for the novel I just finished, it is back in East Texas. I was like, what? And I wish I could talk about it. I hope it gets announced soon. But it's, it was like, oh my God, this actually has to be set back there. And there's specific reasons for it. And it'll be obvious once I'm able to really talk about it. Why? I do think I could, I would one day love to maybe set something in Europe, just in the few cities that I've been to. That still feels very daunting to me, but I don't know. It's kind of fun to challenge yourself, sometimes to shake it up a little bit. I don't want to just be a one joke Janet where I'm just writing about the crazy people in East Texas,
Right. I think with Hollywood Assistant, reading it, having read your other books before it, and then reading that, there was something you could tell there was a little bit of a difference in terms of the prose writing, in that it had that kind of noir, very like rich atmosphere, the way you were kind of using language and imagery. It felt like you kind of picked up on that vibe and ran with that. So is that something I guess, was that something you were consciously aware of, or was that something that more kind of like crept into the writing? And then also, is there anything from that you would kind of then take back to your like familiar settings?
I think it was a conscious attempt anyway to try to do that, because I did want it to be more moody and maybe more of psychological suspense kind of than my others. And so, yeah, I think it was a mix of, I was consciously trying to create that. And then also it just kind of also kicked in. I hope that I could bring a different set of eyes to the familiar, Texas setting. Yeah, I hope. Oh my God.
Well, May, when we first started talking, you mentioned this nonfiction book about a jazz musician. And I'm wondering, just nonfiction in general is very daunting to me personally. And I love the idea of writers who write both in and out of fiction and nonfiction, but also specifically, it sounds like music is really important to you. Can you talk to us about that project and music in general?
Yeah, it's crazy. I first heard his music in college down here in Austin, and it was one of those moments where when I heard the song, it's like I felt like I knew him. And so I literally raced to the record store right after, and I bought a box set, and I started to read about him, and I was like, okay, he was blinded at age 2, and yet by the time he was 14, he taught himself to play 3 saxophones at the same time. Greg's a fan of his, and he knows all this already, but it's and you may be as well. I don't know if you're.
I don't know him.
Yeah, he's unbelievable, and he's just it's really more a story about his like unstoppable human will, and he overcame all this stuff. And so it really just started me. I was like, I have to know this person. I just became obsessed. And so as soon as I graduated, like a year later, I was like, I'm going to write a book about him. So I kind of like ditched a lot of stuff and maxed out credit cards and retraced his footsteps, because he was already gone. He died in 1977. He died actually on my 4th birthday, which is very strange and spooky and weird. And I eventually did track down his widow, and we connected, and she's still a really, really dear friend of mine. She's let me stay in their house for weeks at a time. I have her total blessing. She thinks we have some connection, he and I. And so part of the book is me trying to understand that connection. What is that? Why did I feel compelled to do this? It doesn't really, there's no rationale behind it or reason. So I was able to speak to probably like 100 different people, and I got these great firsthand accounts, and a lot of people aren't with us anymore. So I'm really glad I did that. But now I really need to finish it and find a home for it.
Well, I was lucky enough to catch your event in New York a few weeks back at the Mysterious Bookshop, and Rasan's widow was actually in attendance at that event. And I was going to ask you, I mean, for the Hollywood Assistant, so not for the book you're working on about her husband, but I was just wondering, kind of what you were talking about earlier at the top of the show. That's kind of a full circle moment for you. Did that do anything in the sense of like maybe like legitimizing the thing in your head or
yes,
how you're looking at it?
Yeah. I mean, how cool was it that she was there? Like it was all I could do to kind of keep it together, to be honest. It was very emotional for me, very full circle. And she is, she's so very proud of me, and that means so much. But she's always had my back. But in terms of me having my own back, it does help legitimize, like, okay, I am a writer now. I can quit pretending like I'm not. And I can actually own that I want to tell his story still. And I think, and I hope that I have grown as a writer so that I can serve his story better than if I had just forced myself to finish it. And some of it is, with nonfiction, you sell it on a proposal, right? So I don't even really need to have it finished. I have probably 200 pages written, and I have a proposal, and I've gotten so many rejections. But that was before I was published. So I do wonder now if I would have better luck, even though it's a different genre, different thing. At least I have some kind of a name. Yeah, we'll see. I'm going to work on it soon, and we'll see what happens. But yes, it's definitely made me go, okay, since you started that, you have written 6 books. So quit pretending like you can't do this.
I don't know if that feeling ever goes away, though, completely. I mean, every book is a new beast of challenge, you know, and I'm just thinking about the kind of added stakes to honor someone's life, you know, the personal connection you have with his wife. It sounds like with the constellation of people who were around him. So, you know, I think be gentle on yourself, because it's not a novel, and you've done that 4 times or more. But
no, it's so true. That's definitely like one of the reasons why it's so hard to work on, because wow, do I want to get this right and land this plane? And it is easier in that way writing fiction, because you're making up your own rules, even if like we all might believe that our characters are guiding us, which I do, and the story is already there and you're just channeling it. You have a lot more free will. You know, I can't rewrite his story and the gaps that I have in research. Like, I can't then just go make something up, you know. I'll just have to explain that I'm kind of a shitty researcher.
Well, having now come from, as you said, you've written 6 novels in the kind of the interim of starting this and where you're kind of coming into it now. Are there particular parts of that fiction writing skill set that you found have been useful to then, you know, jump over into nonfiction?
I think so. I'm anxious to get back to it to see, because I haven't really touched it in a meaningful way in a couple of years now. So I'm anxious to see how my voice has changed. And some of it, I just did a reading about him at Storyfest in Connecticut. I wouldn't change a word about the first chapter, but I also worked maybe 10 years on that chapter. So no wonder. But the rest of it, and maybe the arcs and different things like that, and the structure of it, I'm hoping that will help me, you know, get it, you know, manageable and into a palpable tale that can be published. We'll see.
Okay.
Please, if you need an accountability buddy, I will email you.
Oh, I'd love that. No, I do. It's going to be daunting, but I really do. Like, Dorthana's widow, she's 86. Like, I'd love for her to see it, you know, in her lifetime. And I want to get it out there too. I love talking about him. I love celebrating him. I'm still obsessed with him.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait as soon as we log off here, I need you both to send me music to listen to and everything.
For
and
sure.
that makes me wonder too, with this book specifically, but with all of your writing, do you listen to music when you're kind of channeling the story? Or are you needing to be in a silent space?
I can't listen to it usually when I'm writing, but then I'll do this really weird thing where I'll listen to like maybe 3 or 4 songs exclusively in the car, or at home when I'm on break, that are the same, that keep me in a certain vibe.
Yeah.
Kind of sort of live in that headspace for those chunks of time.
Yeah. How about y'all? Do y'all listen to music while you write?
For me, I can't listen to music with lyrics, but I love listening to like kind of ambient or you know, instrumental. I love piano. But if I am working, I have a project I'm working on, and a lot of it is from the 90s. So I will listen to music of my youth, you know.
Oh, I love it.
And that's been helpful. I've like literally recreated, you know, the mixtapes that were all called like awesome mixtape number 1, 2, and 3, or like total jams, JAMZ. Like I've done that now on Spotify. So, like a lot of Susie and the Banshees and the
Yes.
Smiths and,
Oh my God, yes.
all
Yes.
the emo music. So if it's creating a certain vibe that kind of pertains to the plot, it's essential. But then sometimes I just need to be quiet, because you said something, May, that really like resonated about the story already existing and just channeling it. I really subscribe to that. And sometimes the best way to kind of connect to that, I think, is to just be quiet, and let whatever needs to flow through your fingers to the keyboard or through the pen. But I'm curious, Greg, Greg's a big music head, and so much of the music I know and love is directly because of our very long friendship. So tell us, Greg, like about your music and writing practice.
Well, I'm the same as you, Liz. I can't do anything with lyrics because that just jumbles the pot. Actually, we were just talking with Kelly Garrett about that same thing, having to not have that kind of fighting lyrical thing going on when you're putting words down. But I definitely listen to instrumental music pretty consistently when I'm writing. And then I'll kind of tailor that to either what the book as a whole is, or sometimes what that particular scene is. A lot of jazz, a lot of hard bop. Some classical, a lot of instrumental music, kind of that down tempo that you mentioned, Liz, and then also sometimes film scores as well, because that they have a certain kind of emotional arc that works as well. So what I'll do sometimes is I'll take snippets of different passages from film scores and then build kind of maybe a 2-hour playlist.
Oh,
and
wow!
Then go in and I do, because what I try and do is I try and write in about 2-hour blocks to kind of to get that sustained time in, and that helps to kind of shape it a little bit, and it gets me out of my head enough that I feel like I'm not so self-conscious about what I'm trying to put down. To your point, May, that like helps me kind of get into that unconscious space where the story and the characters kind of start to pull you along and start to lead. And I'm curious, I want to ask you a follow-up question on that. With your books, do you feel like, is there kind of a general time in the writing process where you start to feel like the characters are kind of taking the lead? Does that change with each book? How's that been for you?
I really think for me, whenever I start to get blocked, I always tell myself, let the characters lead you. And so if I can just stop the chatter in my own brain, I just watch what they do and what they say, they will pull me out of whatever swamp I've gotten myself stuck into. And I feel like I'm very much character led. Like I'm watching them and looking at them for cues. And as I'm discovering them, you know how it is. So I don't even know if I answered your question, but that's a cool question.
Yeah, I mean, it was just off the top of my head. I was just curious if like you find that, is it like 20% into the book you start to kind of hear the characters? Is it sort of consistent that way? Does it depend project to project? How does that kind of?
I think it's pretty consistently like I have to hear their voice and I have to be connected to them from the minute go, and if I'm not, it's not going to work type of thing. Sometimes I remember with like writing The Hunting Wives, I got to, oh my God, I'm writing my first ever ensemble party scene. Oh my God, I can't do this. And I really wanted to throw in the towel at that point, honestly, because I was like, that's probably like 30 pages in. And I was like, I am not cut out for this. And I still will freeze up with those bigger scenes, but then as I've sort of written more of those, I'm like, those actually turned out to be the more fun scenes to write. Yeah, I don't know. It's all a pain in the ass, right?
Yeah. On some level, right. It's wild what we do.
Well, but I also hear that it's like fun, and I think that's one of the things that we keep hearing from friends and guests, is that people who've written multiple books seem to have come to a place where they're finding more fun in the process. At least maybe that's not been your experience, but when I read your books, they feel really fun and they feel kind of effortless. I know that the bloodletting that probably has had to occur on your part to make that happen. But I'm just wondering, has that been your experience that, the longer you write, are you finding more joy in it? Are you able to kind of maybe have less self-doubt or self-criticism?
Actually, for me, the opposite's been true. I had the most fun writing the Hunting Wives because there were no stakes. It was really my Hail Mary of like, this is the last thing I'm going to write. And if I can't make a career out of this, I'm not going to do this anymore. I can't do it anymore. I was literally piling up eviction notices. And so I wrote that with no F's to give. And that was fun. That was a lot of fun. Yeah. You know, when you're working with a publisher and, you know, you pitch them something, and I know y'all are familiar with this, and then you have to then go create the whole book, like that's pressure, you know? So I think the trick, I was actually just thinking about this the other day. That's so funny you brought this up, because my friend Rachel Harrison was being interviewed, and she said it was an Instagram live with Dennis from Scared Straight Reads, and he asked her about this thing, and she said that like for her biggest like advice is to try to hold on to the fun of it and why we want to do that. So I'm actually trying to get back there. Like, wow, the pandemic and sort of the loss of childcare and just the deadlines, like, wow, I'm glad you think that my books are fun, because sometimes it was just that like, you know, like, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier that you're going to be working with a new publisher going forward. Has that helped at all with you kind of being able to kind of like refresh in your mind your approach at all?
I think so. I think it'll be interesting, you know, to see, because I've been with my other publisher, Berkeley, for so long, and it was great and everything. So, you know, when you get, it's like, I don't know how to say this, maybe like, you know, you've been in a relationship and then you're going to a new one. So I'm just excited. I'm excited to see how everything's going to go and everything. I guess that's the best way to answer that. I think for me right now, I really do need to find the fun in it all again and to sort of trust that the rest will work out which is a very hard thing to do for a control freak.
Amen. I know it.
When am I going to get an ARC, y'all?
They just literally before we got on this podcast with you, we got the email that they are hot off the press. So we will send it to you. Thank you so much for being interested.
No, please. I can't wait. I'm so excited.
No, once again, incredible timing, literally hours before.
Yeah. I love it. I love the cover so much.
Well, we have an incredible, I mean, we here's another fun little kind of small world thing. Our cover designer for the last 3 books is our friend Dave Littman, and we knew Dave pre-publishing.
Wow.
Dave, we were all at that time living in the West Village. Dave was working at a coffee shop next to the bar where I was bartending at in the West Village, and we got to know each other. We actually worked on a children's book together. And at the time, he left there to go get a graphic design job, and then ended up getting hired in-house at Simon & Schuster. And then our AD, Chris Lynn at Dutton, they had worked together, I think, at SNS. And then Chris tapped him for our sophomore book. So I'm standing in my mom's driveway one day, and I get a call from Dave Littman. He said, "Did you tell Chris Lynn we were friends?" And I said, "No." He said, "Oh, well, he just asked me to design your guys' next book."
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's one of those small world things. But yeah, Dave is incredible. Like, we love his work.
I love that.
We're very, very fortunate to get to, have a kind of a consistent working relationship with that guy. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I really love y'all's covers. I think both Dutton and Berkeley, they're like sister companies. I think they do such great covers. I've been really happy with all mine. So
yeah,
love all your covers.
I think yes, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, I think they do have a really great design department. And again, I mentioned Chris Lynn, who ADs a bunch of that stuff, and Dave and a number of other really kind of just talented designers. So it's nice.
Well, May, I know we're running short on time. This has been amazing, but I did want to because you mentioned when you were working on Hunting Wives that you were kind of at a point in your life where things seemed low, and I can definitely relate to that. And I'm just thinking for people who are listening, who may have that unfinished project, or things haven't been going the way they imagined for their careers and they're thinking about giving up. Is there kind of a takeaway from that part of your career, that experience that you can share, just like to kind of instill that hope? Because it sounds really remarkable that you were like, I'm not going to do this anymore. And this, in the last month, you spent time on the set of the adaptation of that book. I mean,
I haven't really even thought about it like that. That's almost makes me want to tear up. I think it's just, you just can't ever give up on yourself. You really can't ever give up. And I was really ready because I had my debut, Big Woods, was published with a very small indie press, and they did a beautiful job publishing it. I earned out my advance. It got a star review, got great blurbs, but you just don't really, the paycheck is not really the thing. And boy, did we need it. And, I was very crippled after that. And, I told my husband one night, I was like, I have writer's block. And he was like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You have a little boy in there that needs us. And so you're going to go in there and you're going to write something. I was like, okay, oh my God. And his belief in me is really what fired me up. I was like, okay. And it was just like, I had just parted ways with my agent. And so that was a big risky gamble thing, but it wasn't, it didn't turn out to be the best fit. No hard feelings, but that, you know what a personal relationship that is. And so I took like 4 months and I wrote the partial of The Hunting Wives that I'd then sent out to get my new and forever agent, Victoria Sanders. And, it was like, because it was, okay, if this doesn't work out, I really need to find a career. It really, in a weird way, there was no stakes, even though thinking back, I'm like, God, that was enormous pressure to write under. But I couldn't even think about the outcome. It was like, I just had to follow these crazy women into the woods. And also my son was 4. And so there was no ladies' nights or girls' night out. And so I was like, I'm going to do this on the keyboard. Like, this is fun to hang out with these crazy bitches every day. So I think it's just, don't ever give up on yourself. Just don't, like, before, right around the corner, even if it's just like dark times, you could have the very best news waiting for you. It's happened a few times where it's almost spooky, where I've been at my lowest and then literally within hours, a blessing has arrived.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
It's so hard. It's all such a pain in the ass, like I said, but it's worth it. Because if we're called to do it, we want to do it. And the world does not want you to do it. And the world will not clap for you and encourage this type of behavior. And they want us to all get serious and settle down, but damn it, we don't need to listen to them, whoever they are.
Inspiring words from May Cobb herself. May, as far as we're concerned, you found the perfect career, and we are all the better and luckier for it. So thank you for pushing through. Thank you for being here and spending, an hour of your time with us. We are certainly the better for that. Before we let you go, where can people find you on the socials and out in the wider world?
My website's just my name, maycobb.com. And I'm always on Instagram, May_Cobb.
Right.
Thank y'all for having me. This was such a blast.
God, you have to come back. And as soon as we get the news about your new project, we will sing it to the mountains.
Amazing.
And we'll have you on again for your next one.
Thank you guys so much.
You're so welcome. Imposter Hour with Liz and Greg is created and hosted by us, Elizabeth Keenan and Greg Wands. The show is produced and edited by Bookwild Collective founder Kate Herget, and Scott Leeds composed our original theme music, and Steve Luoma designed our logo.
You can find us on IG at Imposter Hour Podcast and online at imposterhour.com.